In today's video, we're going to take a look at 6 different ways to rig up your nymph dropper rigs. And I bet you didn't know there was 6 different ways to do it. So I'm going to be showing you basically how to rig these 6 different rigs. I'm not going to show you the knots. There's plenty of videos out there on how to tie a clinch knot, a surgeon's knot, and a blood knot. So we're not going to waste your time with showing you the knots. I am simply going to show you how to use those knots into making these rigs, and then we'll go over the reasons on why to use some over the others. So let me pick out the first one here. This one will be the most common one. This one is basically clinch knot to the eye of the hook, which goes to your leader, and then a clinch knot to the bend of the hook, which then goes to your dropper. One of the best things about this is it keeps all of your flies in a line, which means it's easy to cast, it's easy to untangle, it goes through the water very nice. It is also one of the easiest ones to do because it's just clinch knot, clinch knot, clinch knot. That's it. So this one is the most common. Now, one of the reasons not to use this, and pretty much weeds, that's what sums it up. So if you catch a fish on this lead fly and this dropper is swinging around in the current and snags some weeds or some rocks or logs or whatever, or another fish hits this dropper fly, what's going to happen is it is simply just going to yank that lead fly right out of the fish's mouth. Happens to me all the time. But if you're fishing clean bottom, rocky river, no weeds, and you simply want to keep it simple, this is the rig for you. And believe it or not, this is really what I use probably 80% of the time. It's so easy, it's so fast. Next one, let me dig here through the pile, is clinch knot to the eye, double clinch knot to the eye. So on this rig, we essentially tie a clinch knot to the eye of the hook twice. So same thing as the other one, leader to clinch knot, then clinch knot to the eye again, and then dropper. Now the beauty of this is, unlike the one that was tied to the bend of the hook, is if a fish or weeds or something snags this little dropper fly, this just keeps digging in deeper, just keeps burying the hook. So if you're fishing weedy situations, this is a very good option because you will not lose fish when that dropper fly gets snagged. So also very easy. Again, 3 clinch knots. You don't need to know anything else. Another downside though is if you are fishing, let's say 2 small flies, getting the tippet through the eye of that hook twice, especially if you're fishing anything bigger than 4 or 5x, very, very difficult. So this works really good for like rubber legs, worms, stoneflies, something where you have a larger eye that you can get both of those pieces of tippet into. So this is my second preferred rig. This is one of my favorites, especially if you're just looking to simplify things and still have basically a rig that will stay stuck in a fish's mouth. Now, one thing I also forgot to mention about this rig is when it's all in a line, like the first one I showed you, if you run your hand down your leader, you can kind of feel the hook bend and you can kind of move and dodge it. With this, if you slide your hook down the line here, you are getting bit. So you have to be real careful when handling this rig, because if you just slide your hand down, you're getting the rubber legs in the palm of your hand. So just be careful with that one. Next rig is, let me find it here. Very similar to the one we just looked at. So you can see that that fly is also cocked off to the side. Now, what you do with this one is you tie a clinch knot to the lead fly through the eye, but you leave the tag end so long that you can tie a dropper onto the tag end. So what I did was I tied just a clinch knot with like a 10-inch tag end. And when I tightened down the clinch knot, the tag end, I just left it way back here and I tied my dropper on. So this has all the benefits to that double clinch knot to the eye, except it's only 2 knots. Now with this fly, your fly will sit at a slight angle rearwards, if you can see that, because it sits kind of on the back of the knot at an angle, whereas the double clinch knot to the eye will sit more at a right angle on your rig. So that's just a slight difference. Also, if you want to change rigs with this one, when you clinch or clip that clinch knot, you lose essentially both the dropper line and the leader line. Whereas the double to the eye, you can just clip one or the other of those knots and retie it there. So just a heads up that this is kind of like a one-time use rig, because if you clip this, now you'll have your dropper on a line, you'll have your leader on a line, and to redo it the way that you have it done here, you'll have to actually clip the dropper fly completely off and then retie it. Or the second time after you clip it, you can just go eye to eye like we did on the rig previously shown. So really cool. It's only 2 knots. So this one is probably the easiest one to tie because it's only 2 knots. So you can get this one rigged up very, very quickly. All right, we got 3 more here. So next is the surgeon's knot tag end. So this one's pretty simple. You just tie your tippet to tippet surgeon's knot. Lots of videos on the internet, including me. I've done some of those. And you leave the tag end nice and long. So you do a surgeon's knot. And when you're doing these tag end knots or these tag end rigs, leave your tag ends really, really long to start. The longer you leave them, the easier it's going to be for you to tie the clinch knot to the fly. If you leave them short like this one's pretty short, only 3 inches or so, you're going to have probably a difficult time if you're not used to dealing with short pieces of line and tying knots. So my advice would give yourself 10 inches or so to tie on that clinch knot to the dropper. But essentially, very easy. Just tie your surgeon's knot, leave a long tag end, tie your lead fly to one of the tag ends, clip the other tag end, and then just tie on your dropper fly just like you would anyways on the tippet portion. And one of the benefits to this rig is that this fly is out there just dangling in the current. Now you can see with your surgeon's knot, you will get a slight angle to that tag end. That tag end comes down at an angle off of that surgeon's knot. Now, what that means, if you leave this really long and you're using a limp material, this thing can actually spin on your rig. And you can see there kind of how it spun a little bit and gets wrapped around your line. That's just part of the deal with kind of fishing those straight off tag end type of droppers. So every once in a while you'll have to bring it in, look at it, and make sure that that fly is separated from your standing line. And you also want to make sure that there is enough room in between the lead fly and the dropper too. So if you'd make this tag end too long, you don't want this lead fly to be, all the way down there by your dropper getting tangled. So make sure you leave some separation, about 18 inches or so. All right, next is the blood knot dropper. So a little bit more difficult knot, and that is the blood knot. Plenty of videos also on the internet of this knot. This one's a little better than the surgeon's knot because it is a little stronger, and also it sits off of your standing line at 90 degrees. So what that means is it will resist more of that twisting that the surgeon's knot will give you because it is 90 degrees off. Especially if you're using a little bit stiffer material like 2X or 3X, it'll help keep that fly from twisting. And of course, you'll trim off one of those tag ends and just leave the other one exposed, and then tie your dropper off of that. And lastly, the tippet ring rig. So newest craze now is tippet rings, and biggest reason is because you can tie all clinch knots. Don't need to know anything else. So you can just take your leader, clinch knot it to a tippet ring, take your tippet, clinch knot it to the tippet ring, and then tie on your little dropper, and then take a separate piece, tie it onto the tippet ring, and then come off of there and tie your lead fly. Now, beauties of this is it's very easy to manage the length of your droppers because it is a separate piece of mono. It's not like a tag end on a knot like the surgeon's or the blood knot. Those, it's a little hard to gauge and manage the length because you have to plan ahead before you cinch down that knot on how much length you want. So with this one, for a beginner, it's very easy because it's 3 clinch knots. The separate piece of mono allows you to just tie on however long you want it to be. Now, one of the downsides is this tippet ring, the knots will tend to move and slide on it. So your flies can be sitting down at an angle, they can be sitting sideways, they can be sitting up at an angle. So the knot is not fixed on this tippet ring. It's kind of sliding around. So you have to keep that in mind when you're determining the length too, because if you go too long and this knot just slides down, if you made it too long, it'll be basically, you could end up with it being the length of your dropper, which you don't want. So you just have to understand that there is a chance that that knot will slide down a little bit, it will twist, it will twirl, but that's the trade-off to it being so simple. So all in all great options. Really, you're trying to just balance the conditions that you're fishing, the size of the fly that you're fishing, the quickness on how you want to rig up, are there weeds, are there snags, and really, I get away with just tying to the bend most of the time, and then also tying to the eye most of the time, but that's just me personally. But that is 6 different ways to rig up your nymph dropper rigs.